So a few months back, I found this really old Apple II computer just hanging around at the flea market, sitting on the ground. I basically got it for $40, not really knowing if it worked or not. Now, since I've gotten this thing, it's just been sitting in my garage. I didn't really try to power it on or anything to see if it works. I wanted to wait till I found an expert, and I think I found one. So there's a YouTuber called 8-Bit Guy, and he's actually local, but funny enough, we've never actually met him and hung out with him.
I got an email from him, and he just said he was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He picked up this Apple II. I went and found the video online on YouTube and watched it, and I think he just wanted to bring it by and have me look at it. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do that.
Now, he really knows his old school computer, so if anybody can figure out if this thing is in good working order or not, it's gonna be him.
I have been a fan of 8-Bit Guy's channel for several years now. For one thing, you actually are probably gonna learn something in the channel, unlike ours. So there's some type of use.
Now, Jay's not gonna be here today. Something about going to Kansas City, going on a date with Norm. I didn't ask.
When the evil shredder attacks, them turtle boys don't cut them no slack.
Yeah, could you grab that? Thank you.
We get to his house. The first thing we do, he's like, hey, let's go get some lunch. The first thing we do, Billy and me, like a couple of slack-jawed idiots, is we couldn't figure out, like a couple of chimps, we couldn't figure out how to open the door to his car. He had a Tesla. I've never seen a Tesla before in real life, okay? And the doors were like all like technologically advanced and stuff. They're not like regular doors. You know, you're supposed to, and it didn't do that. That's the first impression that we have with 8-Bit Guy. So I'm sure he's sitting there thinking, okay, yeah, this is gonna be a blast.
It was kind of embarrassing. Like, I kind of figured out how to. I mean, to be fair, the handles there was no. It was weird.
Well, like a couple of Neanderthals. Like the technology was just. And the sad thing is if he wouldn't have come back around the corner and opened the door for us, I don't think we would have ever figured it out. We'd have been like, start hitting on the door and stuff. Start hitting the windshield.
Where do my expertise lie? Well, historically, always with computers. Obviously, for my YouTube channel, my expertise lie in computers from the 80s.
I actually do watch a lot of 8-Bit Guy, so it's kind of surreal being in his studio here that I see on YouTube all the time for actually years now.
Ooh, man, this is kind of pretty dirty.
Kind of rough shape.
I've never seen one of these before. It's just apparently some kind of aftermarket, like disk drive holder.
Yeah,
does it come off, or how's it?
Yeah, I think it slides out.
Yeah, this particular Apple II, being an Apple II Plus, is kind of like the Model T of Apple IIs. I mean, it's a really early model. Have you actually tried plugging this in yet?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not. I picked it up and it's been sitting in my garage.
I saw the video.
It's just been sitting in my garage. I hadn't really tried anything because I didn't want to plug it in and potentially do something that messed it up, so I wanted to have an expert look at it.
It looks like a ball of spaghetti or something. I mean, there's just so much stuff attached to it, and it's dirty.
I'm kind of encouraged because he didn't just outright say, hey, this thing is a paperweight, you've been screwed.
I mean, I don't see any serious corrosion or any problems on the motherboard. The biggest concern would probably be the reefa caps in the power supply. Mm-hmm. It's quite common if they've been sitting along, decades, they may blow up and they make a horrible stench. I have definitely had reefa caps blow on me on both Apple IIs. I had it happen on an old Osborne, and yeah, it smells like burning rotten fish or something like that for like hours, and the smell just lingers. Nothing we can really do about that. If it blows up, it blows up.
But we definitely want to try to plug it in, right?
Well, not yet. What I want to do is try to take out some of these unnecessary cards, and just like this, for example. We don't need this.
Now, what is that?
I don't even know.
It seems that there's a lot of things in here that aren't needed for the actual computer to work.
That's one of the things I try to do, is get rid of some of these unnecessary cables. You've got an RF modulator hanging in there. Definitely don't need that.
It sounds like a lot of this stuff is just here to maybe have it hooked up to a television, which is completely unnecessary.
I think this is a third-party 80-column card. So I think what it does is you would run the composite from the back of the case into one of these jacks, and then the other jack would go to the monitor. Yeah, it's probably A for Apple, M for monitor.
One of the main concerns when I was first purchasing this thing was this particular wire coming out and how it was cut. I didn't know what this went to, how important it was.
Is this a joystick? Oh, looks like it used to be a joystick. Okay, well, we're going to take that out of there too.
That sounds like something that could be easily replaceable.
What is that? Well, I think it's a language card, but it says Microsoft on it instead of Apple, so I don't think I've seen that. I'll tell you right now, by the way, I am not an Apple II expert. I'm a Commodore expert, but an Apple II, I know enough about them, but I'm not.
Compared to me, you're an expert, so.
I'm obviously way more knowledgeable than the average person on Apple IIs, but I would not consider myself an expert by any means. I mean, I know my way around them. I know the basics of them. Got something else here. Videx? I have no idea what this card is. Whatever it is, we don't need it right now, So all we've got left is the language card and the disk drive card, which is all we really need to test this thing.
Now, what does the language card do?
The main thing is it's basically just a 16K expansion. It just adds, basically boosts the machine up to 64K. It does some other things too, but that's like the primary thing.
So he's got all the unnecessary stuff out of this. It's time to test this thing and see if it works. I don't have high hopes. I mean, because I don't know where this thing has been stored over the years. This is Texas. Oftentimes people will store things in attics and barns and sheds, and year after year it gets so hot and humid. When you store electronics in those types of places, they're going to deteriorate, they're going to go bad a lot quicker. And this thing is really old, and from the looks of it, from the outside and how nasty it looks, I wouldn't be surprised if this thing had been stored in a barn, because it kind of looks like it.
I'm not expecting this thing to even work. This thing is probably sitting in some attic for 30 plus years. In my opinion, this thing is most likely just a shell.
Well, let's just see what happens.
Time to test this thing and see if it works.
Well, let's just see what happens. Oh, it is working.
Working Apple II. Look at that.
It's sharp too. Well, on the bright side, it did power on, and the reefer caps didn't blow, so that's always a plus, although that could still happen.
I'm really, really shocked that this thing is actually firing up. Even the monitor, I'm surprised the monitor even works, and it looks really good. The text is all nice and crisp. It looks just gorgeous, actually. Okay.
This disk drive looks like it is damaged, and that is our primary drive. This one seems like it might be okay.
Unfortunately, it doesn't look like the main hard drive hooked up to the computer is working, but he thinks that the other one is, so he's gonna switch them out.
All right, so now we can unplug these from the disk drive card.
Now,
and even though they've labeled this one as drive 2, we're gonna make it drive 1. Put that back over to slot 6. Okay, so what we need now is a disk.
now that he has this other drive hooked up as the main drive, it's time to check it out and see if it works.
All right, now here's the thing I always get, I always take flack for, because when I'm testing out a computer and I need a disk, well, the closest thing I have in reach is usually one of my own games. So for Apple II here, for example, I've got an entire box of Apple II Pesky Robots.
So 8-Bit Guy actually makes his own games. He's made a game called Pesky Robots, and he's put it out on many different consoles, one of them being the Apple II.
So I've written a number of games over the years, and I guess the one I'm the most proud of is, of course, Pesky Robots. We definitely have more ports of that game than any of the other ones.
We know the game's gonna work, so this is a great test.
Yeah, these discs are all recently made. That doesn't sound good.
Yeah. So he's put the disk for Pesky Robots into the drive, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be reading. But that sucks.
On the bright side, it looks like all your keys are working, and that's good because this particular, the Apple II Plus, kind of notorious, these keys, when you find an old one, that half of them don't work.
Okay.
So, hey, that's good.
So it looks like just the drive is the main issue.
And I bet we could get one of them working, especially if we take parts from both. And if we've got time, we might investigate that. However, there's something else we can do.
Oh man, that sucks.
This is a floppy drive emulator for an Apple II. It just plugs right into that disk drive controller card and it will pretend to be a floppy drive. And I've got various software on here, so we can try loading something from this.
So you can play any game, emulate it through this little thingy, and it'll send a signal out, and then the Apple II is like, oh, look, it's the hard drive, and it's the pesky robot.
Okay, what have I got this set on? The print shop was the last thing I was loading on there. That was probably when I was doing my Apple II documentary. Unfortunately, it says the print shop companion requires 640K. It should have 640K. Oh, not 640, 64K. It should have 64K because of this language card, unless it's just not working. So this is where my knowledge of Apple II is probably just not adequate to solve this problem, but a lot of these games and stuff we're trying to run are saying they need 64K, and the machine just doesn't have it. Now, it has a language card in there, which should be bumping it up to 64K, but it doesn't seem to be working. And maybe I just don't understand enough about Apple II architecture to realize what's wrong. You know, that may be why Protoss wouldn't load. Unfortunately, that just means there's a lot of the more modern games that came out in the later 80s. I'll redo that.
Unbelievable. It is cool seeing this thing fire up, and I have very vague memories of the Apple II.
This is my game, Pesky Robots, and it does get a little bit further than the disk drive does, but it says requires 64K, so...
Okay. Now, the language card is basically a memory expansion pack, for lack of a better explanation, which will allow the computer to have 64K of memory. It doesn't seem like the one in here is working, though.
Could try spraying some deoxid on it. So the biggest problem with the lack of 64K is it just means a lot of the later games that came out in the later 80s, you know, probably most of the better games, are just simply not going to run on this machine until somebody can figure out what's going on with that. I never could figure out what this card does. I wonder if this goes with the language card in some way. Maybe both have to be in there.
So one of these cards that he had pulled out of the computer initially, he didn't know exactly what it was, and so he's going to try to put it back in and see if that has anything to do with maybe getting the 64K language card to actually function.
I'm sorry, let's see what happens. Nope, same problem. Well, let's try running something that doesn't require 64K.
So unfortunately, after trying multiple things, multiple attempts at trying to get this language card to work, it doesn't look like it's going to.
So your typical early Apple II games, particularly from the era that this computer came from, only usually need 48K. Okay, well that's a little something. Yeah, this is actually, I'm sure you've heard of Wolfenstein 3D.
Absolutely.
It is based on this game concept, which is a 2D game.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Wolfenstein has been an ongoing series for a long time. I had no idea that it actually dated back to the Apple II days. That's pretty crazy, and if you had asked me that, I would have had no idea it went back that far.
Now, you do realize this is one of the really early Apple IIs, right? I don't know if I mentioned that.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah, this is one of the really early ones. But yeah, this thing here's got 1980 on the board, so I mean, this is a really, really old one.
And I almost passed on it because, you know, I know so little
about it.
about
What did you pay for it?
$50.
Oh, well, you got a steal then.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, an
Okay.
Apple II Plus. And I'm not as pricey. I know people are always asking me, David, what's this or that worth?
Yeah.
And I'm not always an expert on that sort of thing, but I think the Apple II Plus in working condition, just the machine alone, is usually worth like $200 or $300.
Now, the guy at the flea market, obviously, if he had known this thing was working, he would have charged more. But if I had known it was working, I would have paid more. And that's kind of the deal, right? What is the risk you're willing to take? How much is that of that are you willing to pay?
But yeah, I don't know. This maybe could benefit from some retro bright, but I'm not sure.
So the sole reason for me even coming up here was just to see if 8-Bit Guy can get this computer up and running. But he's decided to actually just take it upon himself to start cleaning it. And I didn't ask him to do it, but I'm definitely not going to stop him either. Like it's right off the factory floor now.
So that looks pretty good now compared to earlier. So I definitely get a sense of joy or accomplishment, or, you know, I don't even know, satisfaction is probably the right word for restoring an old computer and seeing it go from nasty and disgusting to, you know, showroom quality again. And this one was way easier to do than I thought it was going to be.
Again, this thing is looking just almost museum quality at this point. It's pretty crazy how cleaned up this thing is getting.
So I'm hoping, since it looks like one disk drive has a physical malfunction with the door and the other disk drive just simply won't read any disks, I'm hoping we can swap enough parts between the two to at least get one disk drive functional. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I want to see if this drive, the door was broken on it, but I'm going to just try holding it down manually and then turning on the computer and see if it will read it. And that way we'll know if the rest of the mechanism works. I think it's working. Yeah. The game won't load because we need 64K, but the drive does work. Oh. So I think we can definitely make one functional drive between these two. It should not be a problem.
So it's just the door that's the problem?
It's just the door. The drive itself is actually working. So what he's doing is he's taking that door and he's going to put it onto the working drive. So that way we have one functional drive.
Okay, so I've taken the door from this broken drive and put it on this one, and I think we have a working drive now. We're about to find out. Okay. Yep.
So right now in front of me, I have a really clean, museum quality, beautiful looking Apple II with a working drive and a working monitor. And the only issue is I can't play games that require 64K of memory, which could be fixed.
It blows me away that he's actually able to get this thing up and running, much less actually running programs. So the fact that he was able to get this thing to that condition is you know, more than I could have expected. And, you know, it's awesome to see this thing come back to life.
I'm amazed. I'm absolutely amazed to see what we came in here with, what it looked like before, and to see the final product and have this thing actually working is just amazing.
I want to send you home with a complimentary copy of Petsky Robots, but what kind of, because I know you're into game systems, what kind of game system? You probably have everything, right?
I have everything. What I would play most on is probably NES and Super Nintendo. Or Genesis. I can't imagine how much work this was to not only just design your own game, but port it to so many different systems.
Here's what I got for you. So I have just a few of these left. So that's for the Super Nintendo. It's the European shell, but the PCB is exactly the same. I think I always dreamed of either being a scientist or a computer programmer writing computer games. And so I actually finally did get to be that. I'm obviously working on a new game called Planet X16, but that's only for the Commander X16. And I'm really proud of that one too, but I'm definitely proud of Petsky Robots. The fact that it's on like 21 different platforms now is a feat that I think will be hard to beat. Well, there you go. That's my gift to you.
Oh, dude, thank you
you
so
want
much.
to sign it?
Oh, of course I want you to sign it. I was about to say.
Kind of like a dream for a lot of retro video game themed kind of YouTubers is, you know, what's that one thing that you'd like to do if you had the opportunity? Create your own game. Who wouldn't want to be able to create their own game and create a world and a universe and characters and stuff that they have full control over?
I love it. I love the fact that people are still making retro games.
You know, I would love to make a video game. I'd make an RPG, and I think it'd be called Melvar the Great.
Well, David, thank you. Hey, at least this thing is working. At least it's playing games, and I consider that a win.
Is it important to me to keep these old consoles and computers working and in good physical shape? Yeah, because, you know, future generations, they're going to want to be able to look at these. And, you know, it's one thing to see, you know, an old computer or old game console that someone pulled out of a dumpster somewhere that's all like nasty and yellowed and doesn't work. I don't really feel like that gives the younger generation that didn't grow up with these, it doesn't really give them an idea of what it was really like. I mean, it's kind of like looking at an old car in a junkyard versus seeing a restored car at a car show.
There's something about these old school primitive games playing on these old PCs. I just there's a charm to them. I think you had to have lived in that era to really get it and appreciate it.
I always love seeing people trying to preserve that. And the people who have the know-how to rebuild a computer and refurbish it, some of this old technology, and get it up and running again, I think there is a real historical value to that can't really be discounted.
This is a part of not just gaming history, but just computer history. The Apple II was pivotal. You know, at this point, most of them have been trashed. They're in landfills. And so when you can find one like this, get this thing and restore it and have it in working order like this, you really are restoring a piece of history.
You know, I'm glad that he was generous enough with his time to let us complete strangers, you know, potential crazy people, you know, go into his place, and very generous and trusting to a couple of strangers who could have been loonies, you know, for all he knew.
So do I think this was a good score for $50? Absolutely. I mean, even if it's just going to sit on a shelf, I mean, the value of this machine is well, you know, I'd probably say $200 or $300 for an Apple II Plus that works. It cleaned up really nice. All the keys work. If you could solve that memory problem, you'd even be able to play a lot of games on it. So yeah, I think it was a great score.
Definitely accomplished a lot. Thank you very much to 8-Bit Guy for doing all the work and doing something that I totally couldn't do. And I was actually on my best behavior. Most of the time when we go to people's houses, especially people that we are meeting for the first time, there's usually let's not kid ourselves, there's usually a fart or two.
I'm sure people who have met us, you know, think that, you know, boy, that was a real letdown.
Seeing how this thing cleaned up and I don't know, I just think that maybe I want to keep it. I want to keep a piece of history. And I might have to put it in the closet because I don't got room right now. But, you know, maybe one day if Mark Cuban pays me $1 million to finger his taint, I can get a bigger game room and put it on display or something like that.
I'm really glad that he gave us the opportunity to come here and film. We got Billy's computer up and running. This is a win-win.
So basically what you're saying is the Apple II made you realize that our parents were horrible.
Not necessarily horrible, but man, shit fucked up. I mean, for real, it is. It's up.
You know, usually when we go to somebody's house, especially somebody that we don't know, this is key. You know, it's often within our etiquette to greet them by farting audibly and then laughing about it. But I didn't do that here. I actually spared 8-Bit Guy the traditional "Hi, nice to meet you," ripping one, dropping ass. Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't feel like it was appropriate. So I just clenched my butt the whole time.